It was a tense morning in Washington in May 2025 when Donald Trump, in his second term as president, decided to make what would become the biggest mistake of his political career. During a meeting with advisors at the White House, he expressed growing frustration with Ibrahim Traoré. "This African kid is causing too much trouble," Trump said, banging his fist on the Oval Office table. "First, he kicked out our agents. Now other African countries are copying him. We have to do something." Steve Bannon, recently reinstated as a strategic advisor, suggested a direct approach. "Mr. President, why don't you invite him for an interview? Show the world who's really boss." Trump grinned. "Brilliant. I'm going to humiliate him on national television. Show that America will not tolerate disrespect from a little African dictator." The call was made immediately. "Ibrahim, my young friend," Trump said with false cordiality, "how about a live chat on Fox News? Clear up some misunderstandings between our countries?" On the other end of the line in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré smiled as he secretly recorded the conversation. "Of course, Mr. President, it will be interesting to discuss America-Africa relations publicly." Trump, confident that he would control the narrative, accepted the proposed format, a live debate moderated by Sean Hannity. "It will be easy," he told Bannon. "I will show this kid how real politics works." What Trump didn't know was that Ibrahim had spent weeks preparing something special for this very moment. "Dr. Ouedraogo," Ibrahim said after hanging up, "Trump has just fallen into the perfect trap. Prepare all the documents we have collected on him in the last few months." "President, are you sure? This could cause a diplomatic crisis," the minister warned. "Crisis already exists," Ibrahim replied coolly. "Trump has declared an unofficial war on Africa. Time to show consequences." In the days leading up to the televised showdown, Trump had been ramping up his preparations with his team, confident that it would be an easy victory over a young, inexperienced African. In the Oval Office, he was reviewing his attack points with aides. "I want to expose all his weaknesses," Trump said, studying briefings on Burkina Faso. "Terrorism, poverty, military coup. I will systematically destroy him." Stephen Miller, the architect of Trump's anti-immigration policies, suggested a more sinister approach. "Mr. President, why don't you question his legitimacy as a leader? Suggest that Africa doesn't produce real leaders." Trump laughed cruelly. "Perfect. I will show that these African countries are irrelevant on the world stage, that America determines who is a legitimate leader and who is not." Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim was coordinating a very different preparation with his intelligence team. "Major Sawadogo, are all the files on intercepted communications ready?" he asked. "Yes, sir. We have recordings of 47 conversations where Trump uses extremely offensive language about African leaders," the intelligence chief replied, "including a December call where he called all African presidents monkeys in suits." Ibrahim studied the transcripts with a grave expression. "What about the evidence of destabilization operations?" "Fully documented, President. Trump personally approved $340 million to overthrow African governments that do not cooperate with American interests." Dr. Ouedraogo still hesitated. "President, exposing this will cause a geopolitical earthquake. Trump has been underestimating Africa for a long time," Ibrahim said determinedly. "Time to teach him what consequences there are." On Fox News, Sean Hannity was preparing to moderate what he hoped would be President Trump's epic takedown of an African dictator. "This is going to be fantastic television," he told producers. None of them imagined they would witness one of the greatest political humiliations in American history, The evening of May 29th, 2025 arrived with an anticipation that neither side had adequately anticipated. In the Fox News studios, Trump adjusted his tie with characteristic confidence, convinced that it would be a triumphant evening. On the other side of the world, Ibrahim Traoré sat serenely in his office, a briefcase of explosive documents at his side. "Good evening, America," began Sean Hannity. "Tonight we have a historic showdown between President Trump and President Ibrahim Traoré over the future of America-Africa relations." The screen split to show Trump in the plush Fox studio and Ibrahim in a simple but dignified presidential setting. "President Trump," Hannity began, "many Americans want to know, how do you intend to deal with the growing challenges from African leaders who are questioning American authority?" Trump leaned forward aggressively. "Sean, it's simple. America first means we don't tolerate disrespect from anyone, especially from countries that depend on our aid." "Ibrahim," Trump said, turning to the camera with a cruel smile, "you need to understand that America determines the world order. Countries like yours exist because we allow them to." Ibrahim remained calmly seated. "Interesting perspective, Mr. President, but perhaps we should discuss what you really think about African leaders when you think no one is listening." "What are you talking about?" Trump asked, the first hint of discomfort crossing his face. "I'm talking about the call you made last December to the President of France," Ibrahim said calmly, "where you referred to African presidents as monkeys in suits who need to be disciplined." The studio went completely silent. Trump paled visibly. That's a lie." "Really?" Ibrahim asked, smiling for the first time. "Hannity, would your producers like to play the recording I have here?" The panic in Trump's eyes was palpable. He knew exactly what conversation Ibrahim was having. Sean Hannity was visibly panicked, realizing that the situation had gotten completely out of hand. "President Traoré, these are very serious allegations." "They are not allegations," Ibrahim interrupted calmly. "These are documented facts. Would you like to play the recording now, or would President Trump prefer to explain first?" Trump was now visibly sweating, gesturing wildly. "Ibrahim, you don't understand the context." "I understand perfectly," Ibrahim said, activating the audio player. "This is the conversation of December 15th, 2024, 2:23 p.m. between President Trump and President Macron." Trump's unmistakable voice echoed through the studios. "Emmanuel, these Africans are getting very arrogant, especially this kid from Burkina Faso. They are all monkeys in suits who think they are important. We need to show them who is boss." Dead silence fell across the studio. Trump tried to deny it. This was taken out of context." "Context?" Ibrahim asked. "What context justifies racist language about democratically elected leaders?" In the recording, Trump continued, "All of Africa should be recolonized. These countries are zoos run by animals." Hannity tried to cut the feed, but Ibrahim continued, "But there's more. This is a call with President Putin where you discuss the final solution to the African problem." "No!" Trump shouted, rising from his chair. "Turn it off!" But it was too late. Trump's voice echoed again. "Vladimir, we need to work together to keep these Africans in their place. Maybe some coordinated operations." "Fake news!" Trump yelled, now completely out of control. "Deep fakes, manipulation." Ibrahim remained calmly seated. "Mr. President, these recordings have been verified by 3 independent agencies, including the FBI, which confirmed their authenticity. You have just proven to the world that your Africa policy is based on pure racial hatred," Ibrahim said. "Not on legitimate American interests, but on white supremacy disguised as geopolitics." Trump was now visibly having a panic attack on the air. Trump was now in a complete meltdown, his hands shaking as he desperately tried to deny evidence of his own racial hatred. "This is a coup," he shouted, pointing at the camera. "Intelligence operation to destroy America." Sean Hannity tried to save the day. "Let's go to commercial break." "There will be no break," Ibrahim said firmly. "The world needs to hear everything." He activated another devastating recording. "This is a conversation with your generals about Operation African Cleansing, a plan to assassinate African leaders you consider problematic." Trump's voice was clear. "I need Ibrahim Traoré gone, permanently. Make it look like an accident." Trump was now hyperventilating. "Lies, all lies." "Mr. President," Ibrahim said calmly, "your own generals recorded these meetings because they were horrified by your orders. 3 of them have already turned over evidence to Congress." "Treason!" Trump screamed. "Deep state! Conspiracy!" Ibrahim flashed documents on the screen. "These are orders signed by you authorizing $500 million to neutralize African destabilizing elements. Your own signature." "And this," Ibrahim continued inexorably, "is a list of 23 African leaders targeted for elimination. My name is at the top." Trump slumped back in his chair, clearly having some kind of mental episode. "No, this can't be real." "It's very real," Ibrahim said, "just like your words about African racial inferiority in a cabinet meeting." Another recording. "These Africans are genetically inferior. Darwin was right about racial hierarchy. America needs to keep them in check." Hannity was now desperately trying to end the show, but the producers knew this was historic television. "President Trump," Ibrahim said, "you have just been exposed as a white supremacist who uses presidential power to promote genocide. How do you explain this to the American people?" Trump was now mumbling incoherently, clearly in complete psychological breakdown. No one was supposed to know. Secret plans. In his state of total panic, Trump began to unintentionally confess, confirming the authenticity of everything Ibrahim had revealed. "You don't understand the pressures I face," he shouted, tears streaming down his face. "America is losing control. These Africans are becoming too powerful." Ibrahim watched calmly as Trump self-destructed on live TV. "So you're confirming that you planned assassinations of African leaders?" "I had to protect America," Trump yelled. "You're taking our markets, partnerships with China and Russia. It was an existential threat." Sean Hannity was now in full panic, realizing that he had just moderated a confession of war crimes on live TV. "President, maybe you should stop talking." "No!" Trump shouted. "I need to explain. Ibrahim ruined everything. Decades-long plans destroyed by an African boy." "What plans?" Ibrahim asked, knowing that Trump was now confessing everything. "Operation Free Africa," Trump said, completely out of control. "Remove all independent African leaders. Recolonize the continent through puppets. It was the only way to keep America great." "And how did you plan to do that?" "Assassinations, coups, civil war, anything necessary." Trump was now confessing to planned genocide on national television. "Africa should serve America, not compete with us." Ibrahim remained impassive. "Mr. President, you just confessed to planned genocide against the African people on world television." It was necessary," Trump mumbled, finally realizing the magnitude of what he had said. "America first, whatever the cost." Hannity finally managed to cut the broadcast, but it was too late. Trump had confessed to crimes against humanity, live in front of 200 million viewers. "Mr. President," Ibrahim said in his final words before the cut, "you have just shown the world the true face of American white supremacism. Thank you for confirming everything we have always suspected." The broadcast ended with Trump sobbing uncontrollably. In the hours following the devastating broadcast, shockwaves rippled not only across the United States but around the world. Clips of Trump's confession went viral, being translated into dozens of languages. Trump confesses to planning African genocide, screamed global headlines. At the White House, panic broke out. Vice President J.D. Vance called an emergency cabinet meeting to discuss invoking the 25th Amendment. The president clearly had a mental breakdown on national television, Vance said. He confessed to war crimes. He cannot continue in office. The Secretary of Defense tried to do damage control. We need to deny everything, say he. At a medical episode, he confessed to planned genocide, the Secretary of State shouted. How do we deny recordings of his own voice? In Congress, Democrats immediately began impeachment proceedings. Trump admitted to planning assassinations of foreign leaders, declared Nancy Pelosi. This is treason, war crimes, and attempted genocide. Even Republicans began to distance themselves. I cannot defend someone who plans to assassinate African presidents, said Senator Mitt Romney. In world capitals, the reaction was one of horror and outrage. The United Nations called an emergency session. The International Criminal Court announced an immediate investigation into crimes against humanity. Trump's confession is prima facie evidence of genocidal intent, the chief prosecutor declared. China and Russia, traditional rivals of the United States, issued a joint statement condemning the supremacist barbarity of the American regime. The European Union suspended all trade agreements with the United States. We cannot negotiate with a government that plans genocide, said the president of the European Commission. On the streets of America, massive demonstrations demanded Trump's immediate removal. Genocide out, chanted crowds in Washington. Even traditional Trump supporters were horrified. This is about more than politics, said a former supporter. It's about basic humanity. Ibrahim, watching the chaos in Ouagadougou, said Trump dug his own grave by underestimating African intelligence and overestimating its capacity to hide hatred. 3 days after his televised confession, Trump was completely isolated politically. His entire cabinet had resigned, Congress had initiated impeachment with bipartisan support, and the U.S. military refused to follow presidential orders. We do not serve genocide, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff declared in a public letter. We are sworn to defend the Constitution, not white supremacy. Trump, barricaded in the Oval Office with only a few loyal aides, was in a deteriorating mental state. Ibrahim destroyed me, he muttered repeatedly. How did this African boy do this? Steve Bannon tried a last-ditch strategy. Sir, we can claim that you were under the influence of drugs. No one will believe this after the tapes, said Trump's lawyer, who was also preparing to drop his client. You confessed to planned genocide on national television. Meanwhile, Ibrahim was being hailed as a world hero. The president of France called him personally, President Traoré, you saved the lives of millions of Africans by exposing these monstrous plans. Pope Francis issued a special statement. President Traoré demonstrated extraordinary moral courage in exposing hatred that threatened all of humanity. Universities around the world were offering honorary doctorates. The Nobel Peace Prize was being considered for Ibrahim. He didn't just defend Africa, said a committee member. He defended civilization against barbarism. In the U.S. Senate, the impeachment vote was unanimous, 100-0. Trump's confessed crimes are indefensible, said the Republican leader. Treason, attempted genocide, conspiracy against humanity. Trump tried to make his final speech on TV, but the networks refused to broadcast it. We will not give a platform to an avowed supremacist, said CNN's president. When federal marshals arrived at the White House with an arrest warrant for war crimes, Trump was still muttering, "Ibrahim, how did he know everything?" The answer was simple. Ibrahim had completely overestimated his adversary, preparing for war while Trump played on racial hatred. 6 months after his devastating televised confession, Donald Trump sat in the dock at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, facing formal charges of crimes against humanity and conspiracy to commit genocide. Ibrahim Traoré was the prosecution's star witness. "Your honorable judges," Ibrahim said during his testimony, "I present evidence of a systematic plan to eliminate independent African leadership and recolonize the continent through violence." The evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, signed documents, bank transfers for assassination operations, testimony from horrified American military personnel. The defendant publicly confessed to genocidal intent, the prosecutor declared. "Rarely do we have such clear evidence of mens rea for crimes of this magnitude." Trump, represented by a trial lawyer, argued a defense of temporary insanity. "My client was under extreme stress. Stress does not justify planning to commit genocide," the presiding judge interrupted. "The evidence shows years of conspiracy, not impulsive decision." During the trial, horrific details emerged. Trump had approved $2 billion for Operation Free Africa, a plan to assassinate 47 African leaders in 18 months. His target list included democratically elected presidents, human rights activists, intellectuals. The former CIA director testified, "This was a planned genocide of African elites." Ibrahim testified about the psychological impact. "Finding out that a superpower president was planning your assassination is traumatic. But worse is knowing that he viewed all Africans as subhuman." The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts, Trump was sentenced to life in prison. "The defendant demonstrated total contempt for human dignity," the judge said at the sentencing. "His crimes represent a return to the genocidal mindset that the world swore it would never allow again." In the streets of Washington, crowds celebrated. "Justice has been done," protesters chanted. "Genocide in jail." In Africa, Ibrahim was welcomed as a continental savior. "He protected us from a modern-day Holocaust," the African Union chairman said. Trump, led away in handcuffs, was still muttering, "Ibrahim, how did he do it?" 2 years after exposing and toppling Donald Trump, Ibrahim Traoré had become a transformational figure in world politics. The United States, under new leadership, had formally apologized to Africa and paid $50 billion in reparations for genocidal conspiracy. Ibrahim was in New York, addressing the UN General Assembly's special session on prevention of genocide. "In the 21st century, 2 years ago, I exposed plans for genocide against Africa," he told the packed auditorium. "Today, we see that eternal vigilance is the price of freedom." Applause echoed for minutes. Delegates from 193 countries rose to their feet in applause, recognizing a man who had saved millions of lives. Trump represented a colonial mentality that has never fully died, Ibrahim continued. He believed that Africa existed to serve the West, that Africans were disposable subhumans. His downfall proves that the era of impunity is over. Leaders who plot genocide will face justice, no matter how powerful they think they are. The UN unanimously approved the Traore Protocol, a global monitoring system to detect genocidal planning by any government. "We will never again allow racial hatred to become state policy," the Secretary General declared. Ibrahim had been elected president of the African Union, uniting the continent as never before. "Trump inadvertently gave us a gift," he said in an interview. "He showed that we needed to be united to survive." Africa was thriving with new unity. The continent's GDP grew 15% a year. Investments in education, health and technology transformed the continent. The Traoré effect created an African renaissance. One economist observed, in a maximum security prison, Trump languished, still obsessed with the man who destroyed him. How did he know? He repeatedly asked guards. The answer was simple. Ibrahim had prepared for war, while Trump had toyed with hatred. One had studied his enemy carefully, the other had underestimated his adversary based on racial prejudice. History would remember Ibrahim Traoré as a man who saved an entire continent and proved that intelligence overcomes hatred, that preparation defeats arrogance, that Africa would never again be submissive to anyone.